to my channel. It's me Anshika, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about how to get high 7s on IB chemistry and IB psychology. So for those of you who don't know, I did the IB M22 exams and I got 44 points out of 45, and my IB results reaction video will be linked below in the description. If you haven't seen that already, do check it out and laugh at me covering the screen with my hands. Anyway, so coming to today's video, I will be talking about all my tips, all my advice, strategies, whatever you want to call it, for getting high 7s on IB chemistry and IB psychology. So I did IB chemistry HL and IB psychology SL, but I'm pretty sure you can generalize them to like SL for chemistry and HL for psychology as well. Also, another thing to note here is that I believe from the 2023 batch, the syllabus has been again expanded to like include paper 3 in chemistry as well and paper 2 for psychology SL as well, which we didn't have because we were like one of the COVID batches, so we had reduced syllabus, so we didn't have paper 3 in chemistry and we only had paper 1 in psychology. So I'll be only talking about those like papers which I gave, because I can't talk about the papers which I did not prepare for. So without further ado, let me start with IB chemistry. Okay, so chemistry is a subject where starting in year 1 I got like low marks as well, like 4s and 5s, and then going into year 2 I started getting like high 6s, which for our school the boundary to get a 7 was 90%, so I was getting like above 80% going into year 2, and then eventually like I worked my way up to 87, 88, and in the final exam I was 10 points above the grade boundary. So tip number 1 that I have for chemistry is to have multiple resources. So for me, the textbook that I primarily used, the one which my school recommended, so to say, was this big thing. This is the Pearson Chemistry HL 2nd edition. So this was the book that I primarily used, like to make my notes and to like do questions and stuff. But then I didn't only rely on this. I also had a bunch of other books because every author like explains different topics in different ways, and there's some topics which I understood really well from this book, but then there were some which I didn't understand. So for those I had this, which is the Oxford IB Prepared for Chemistry. This is a really good book because I feel like it has everything given really concisely, and it has like these examples where they tell you what kind of answer would get what kind of marks. So that's really helpful, and a lot of the topics are explained really well in this. And then I also had this chemistry study and revision guide from Hodder Education. This also has some pretty good questions in it. And then other than the books, I also used to go to MSJ Chem and Richard Thornley. So these are two YouTubers who make IB chemistry videos, and I believe MSJ Chem also has his own website. I'm not sure if Richard Thornley also has one. So these are the two YouTubers who are like, they saved me in chemistry, because a lot of the topics which I felt like I still didn't understand after these books, or sometimes I get bored of reading things just in the book, so I would refer to like the videos on their channels for some specific topics. So for example, for organic chemistry I watched all the Richard Thornley videos, especially like a couple of days before the exam when I'm done with like past papers and like I've read my notes and I memorized everything, but I'm still not sure if I missed anything. That's when I would normally like put on these videos and like watch whatever they were saying while like going through my notes and making sure that I didn't miss anything, primarily because these videos are very, very thorough. Secondly, they're fun because like it's not boring like just reading something or like solving questions. So that was the thing which I used to do when I had very little motivation to do anything else in chemistry. That's what I used to do. And I feel like if you have multiple resources, there's also very little chance that you would miss any syllabus point or like anything that can be tested, because it's sure to be covered in at least one of the books or in like one of the videos that you're going to watch. Tip number 2 is to use the data booklet. So you need to learn how to use the data booklet smartly without wasting time. So data booklet, for those of you who don't know, is a thing which I'll put on the screen here. It's something which has a lot of formulae and like data in it that's given to you in paper 2, and I'm not sure whether it's also given in paper 3, which you have to use to solve certain questions. And so the first thing I'll say is to familiarize yourself with the data booklet, and how you should do this ideally is to use it when you're practicing questions at home and stuff. Instead of just going and googling certain data, you should try to have a physical data booklet with you and flip through it and find where that information is. Slowly over the 2 years, you'll build that habit of using the data booklet. So when your exams come around, you will know where most of the things are, like on which page, so you won't have to like flip around and try to find them. So don't leave your data booklet practice to do in the exam. This way you'll become faster and you'll save a lot of time in the exam. And also another tip is to just memorize generic equations. Like for example, you should know how many, why is there vehicles outside? I don't know why these people want to all roam around on the street when I'm trying to film. Tip number 3 is to start with small steps. So when you start off IB chemistry in year 1, it seems a bit intimidating, and as I said earlier, even I was getting like pretty low grades when I started off, because firstly I did CBSE before, so I wasn't really used to the IB pattern of like questioning and the fact that we had 2 papers. I didn't really know how to study for that, so it will take me some time to figure out all of that and get comfortable with the subject. So that's when you shouldn't just go directly and start doing past papers, and start with small things. So firstly, start preparing each topic as it's going on in class. Then you should use the IB question bank to start doing like small MCQs topic wise instead of going for it all at once, as well as doing textbook exercises. So ideally you should start with like smaller in textbook exercises like these, or like worked examples. Every textbook has these practice questions in the back, so this is the kind of like smaller MCQs that you should start with whenever you start preparing for any chapter. Number 4 is to use the official IB chemistry guide and syllabus. So the IB chemistry guide will give you like really specific details on what's examinable and what's not, so this way you know that you're only preparing as much as required and not like preparing extra things. So for each topic they'll give you each of the understandings, each of the applications and skills that can possibly be on the exam. So if you have seen my final exams week vlog, which will be linked in the description below if you haven't seen that, I generally before my final exams or even mocks, I would sit down and use the IB chemistry guide, and I'd do this for physics as well. I'd sit and just use the understandings and the applications as kind of guides and make mind maps from my memory just to see if I know what each syllabus point is talking about. Or I would also use these sometimes as guides for my notes just to see if I'm missing out on anything. Tip number 5 is past papers. So now once your syllabus is finished, past papers are going to be your best friends. Trust me, you should do past papers from at least the past 6-7 years, from all time zones. Do paper 1, paper 2, everything. And another tip that goes along with this, which is tip number 6 I believe, is to time yourself. Especially for like paper 1, it's very important to time yourself, because I don't even know how many exams I have messed up just because I knew the answers but I didn't know how to manage my time properly, because I never practiced like timed papers at home. I used to practice the papers, but I would take my own happy time in like doing them. I would solve paper 1 in like 1.5-2 hours, and I didn't have that luxury in the exam, so I would end up missing on questions. So don't make that mistake. Time yourself and use apps such as Forest or other, like there's a lot of creative apps these days which will help you do this. And then before your syllabus is finished, there's this very cool website called Pestle, which I will link in the description below, which has all these past paper questions for all these subjects organized topic wise. If I used to get some question wrong, I would just mark it as mark revisit, which would make the question orange, and then later on I would just come back to these orange color questions again. And you're also going to want to track the past papers you're doing. So when I started doing like full length past papers, when I was preparing for my pre-boards and when I was preparing for my final exams as well, I had this little like notebook where I had all the past papers listed, and I would just keep ticking off whichever ones I finished, just so that I won't waste my time doing the same past paper over and over. And then in that same book, I would note down the questions which I found like difficult to understand, or the questions which I kept getting wrong over and over. So I'm going to give you an example here from my physics notebook. So this is the kind of thing that I would put in my little diary. So this is for physics, as I said before, but I would just write the question that I got wrong and then the whole explanation that I would find online, or that I would ask my teacher as to how like you are supposed to get the correct answer. And the final tip, which is tip number 7, is to know the appropriate terminology and the correct keywords. So for chemistry, there's a lot of things which you think that you wrote the correct answer, but then you don't get the marks for it, and then you realize the marking scheme set specifically to use a certain word, and there was no OWTTA thing in it, which basically means other words to that effect. You're not going to get marks for writing similar words. So that's why when you do past papers, it's important to correct them immediately using the marking scheme. Why can't I talk? Specific remarks which say do not award marks for using this term, because it just sucks to lose marks when you wrote something but it's not in the MS. Now coming to the tips for IB psychology. So as I said earlier, these are only for paper 1 because that's the only paper that we had for IB psychology SL in the May 2022 batch. So tip number 1 is do weekly short answer questions and essay response questions. So after you finish a topic or part of a topic, at the end of the week, like on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, sit down and make a list of all the possible SAQs and ERQs from that topic and try to answer as many of them as you can. So I personally used to try and answer like 2 SAQs and 2 ERQs on every weekend, and then I used to do this on a Google Doc which my psychology teacher had access to. So I would just keep typing my answers there, and then whenever she had time, she would just open the doc and correct them and give me feedback in like the comments. And that way I always had like ongoing practice of how to write my answers, the pre-written answers, and I already had feedback on them, so I could correct them before the exam instead of doing trial and error. Okay, so tip number 2 is to use multiple resources. So our teacher made our class use the IB Psychology course book by Thematic Education. The author is Travis Dixon, I believe. So it's this textbook, and also got the accompanying study guide, which is this one. So I used both of these to prepare for all my exams. So if you're using this textbook, then I highly recommend that you also get the study guide. And similarly, if you're using the Oxford textbook, I think that also comes with the study guide. So whichever textbook you're using, get the accompanying study guide, because often authors give a lot of like additional things which will help you prepare for exams really well in the study guide. And so Thematic Education had a YouTube channel which had a lot of great videos on different topics. So whenever I couldn't understand something, I would watch them and like use those as my guide. And also InThinking is a great website to have if your teacher gives you access to that, because our teacher did. And InThinking has all the questions as well as like sample responses. So that gives you a really good idea of what you're supposed to write and what you're not supposed to write, because it also has some examples of answers and responses from students that didn't get good marks. Tip number 3 is to access past year papers and also the marking scheme and the examiner's comments that come along with it. So once again, you know exactly what kind of answers an examiner wants to see and what kind of answer will score how many marks. Tip number 4 is to make a list of all the topics and subtopics from the official IB guide, which once again I'll put up here. You should use that as a guide for all the subtopics, and then make a whole list of ethical considerations and research methods that are used to study that particular subtopic in that particular approach. So this is the kind of thing that I used to do. I would just write the topic, the research methods that could be used to study this topic, the possible studies for each of these research methods, and then I would also put the ethical considerations related to that topic, and once again studies that I could use as examples to explain this ethical consideration. Really going to help you with critical thinking is to write critical thinking in your notes. So when I used to make like my summary notes on all of the studies, in one column on the side of the page I'd have critical thinking points for all the studies. And this was something that I discussed with my classmates. Like our teacher used to have us all discuss critical thinking points, just so that sometimes there's some aspects of a study which don't ring a bell in your mind, but somebody else might think that, oh, this is unethical for this reason. That's something that's going to really help you if you compile critical thinking points for all the studies, especially the ones that you use often. So for example, Loftus and Palmer was one study which I use very often, so I had the whole critical thinking for Loftus and Palmer memorized down to the T. So those were all my tips for IB psychology as well. I know I am not able to give any tips for paper 2, but I hope that whatever I said for chemistry as well as psychology will help you guys out in some way, and if it does, then do leave a comment down below about how it helped you out, because that's the kind of thing that I like to read. And thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for another video. And this is your reminder to like, share, comment and subscribe if you haven't already. Please help me grow this channel so I can keep making new content.
And you're half asleep and I can